She lived in a world most people could only dream of. Lavish mansions, glamorous parties, and the undying love of the king of rock and roll. To the world, Priscilla Presley had everything. But behind the golden gates of Graceland, there was a quiet ache, a yearning that no diamond or spotlight could soothe. What if the one thing she craved, something so simple, so human, was the very thing Elvis could never give her? What do you do when the one thing you want is the only thing you're forever denied? Priscilla was just a young teenager when her life took a sudden, glittering turn. She met Elvis Presley while he was stationed in Germany with the US Army, a chance encounter that would alter the course of her life forever. For a girl barely out of childhood, being noticed by Elvis was like stepping into a dream. He was magnetic, mysterious, and already a global icon. As their connection deepened, Priscilla was swept into a world most only saw in movies. Private jets, luxury estates, and the arm of the most desired man in America. From the outside, her life sparkled like the diamonds he gave her. But once the thrill of the spotlight began to fade, reality set in, and it was far lonelier than she ever imagined. As Elvis's fame grew, so did the distance between them. She had traded the familiarity of her teenage years for a life lived in empty rooms and endless waiting. While the world saw her as the queen beside the king, Priscilla often found herself left behind at Graceland, watching the clock tick in silence while Elvis toured the country, filmed movies, and performed under dazzling lights she rarely got to see in person. Even when they were in the same city, they often lived in different rhythms. Elvis kept nocturnal hours, sleeping through the day and coming alive only after sundown, while Priscilla yearned for something steadier. Mornings together, quiet dinners, the simple rituals of a shared life. But Elvis's world wasn't built for that kind of normalcy. The more his career demanded of him, the more Priscilla slipped into the role of a spectator. Left behind in the wake of his whirlwind life, Graceland may have been a mansion filled with luxury, but for Priscilla, it often felt more like a beautifully decorated prison. With Elvis gone for weeks at a time, she was left to wander the grand halls alone, her world growing quieter with each passing day. The silence wasn't just physical, it was emotional. She rarely had anyone to confide in, no purpose beyond waiting for his return. The glitz surrounding her couldn't mask the gnawing sense that her life was happening somewhere just beyond her reach. In a place bursting with opulence, she felt completely isolated. Even those closest to Elvis could see the cracks forming behind the curtain of fame. His bodyguard, Sonny West, once said it plainly. He got what he wanted, put it away in storage, and went on to something else. Priscilla wasn't treated like a partner. She was more like a possession, admired and then forgotten when the next distraction came along. While fans imagined a fairy tale romance, Priscilla quietly endured long stretches of absence, seeing her husband for mere weekends between marathon tours or Vegas residencies. She didn't ask for gifts or attention, just time. But that, it seemed, was the one thing Elvis couldn't or wouldn't give. Even when Elvis was home, he wasn't truly present. He slept through daylight hours, emerging only when the moon was high, ready to socialize with his entourage or retreat to the bedroom, leaving Priscilla with nothing but the stillness of another wasted day. The isolation weighed heavier over time, a quiet kind of sorrow that grew harder to ignore. She began to question what kind of life she was truly living, one spent waiting in shadows as the world outside moved on without her. And as the walls of Graceland closed in, Priscilla's longing for something more, something real, only grew stronger. As the years went on, whispers began to follow Elvis wherever he went. Rumors of fleeting romances, secret rendezvous, and quiet affairs that seemed to shadow every tour and film shoot. The tabloids hinted at it, the gossip columns printed it, and the people around him often saw it firsthand. But back at Graceland, Priscilla was left with only half-truths and lingering doubts. Each headline chipped away at the image she had built of their love. And though Elvis always came home, he rarely came home unchanged. Priscilla wasn't naive. Even early in their relationship, she could feel it, that sense that something was being kept from her. Sometimes it was a strange tone in his voice. Other times, a late-night phone call cut short or a sudden shift in his demeanor. When she confronted him, Elvis was quick with his denials. charismatic and convincing as ever. He'd laugh it off, call the stories lies, blame jealous reporters or scheming women trying to taint his name. He had an answer for everything, and for a while that was enough. She wanted to believe him, needed to believe him, because facing the truth meant unraveling everything she had sacrificed to be by his side. But those around them saw the tension grow, and even Elvis's longtime friend and bodyguard, Red West, admitted that Priscilla's trust had limits. He said she stopped believing the excuses, even if she didn't say it out loud. The sparkle in her eyes began to dim. The more she tried to look the other way, the more difficult it became to pretend. Behind the perfectly posed photos and polished public appearances, a quiet heartbreak was taking root. And slowly, Priscilla began to see that sometimes love isn't just tested by distance, but by the painful truths we refuse to admit. Over time, the walls of Graceland, once symbols of status and privilege, began to feel more like invisible chains. Priscilla, once dazzled by the world she had entered, found herself yearning for something far simpler than fame, a life that felt like her own. The days blended together in stillness. Her purpose narrowed to waiting, accommodating, enduring. Beneath the polished surface of her life was a quiet desperation to be seen not as Elvis's wife or a figure in a fairy tale, but as a person with dreams, needs, and a voice that had long been silenced. It was during this chapter of questioning and emotional solitude that Priscilla met Mike Stone, a charismatic karate instructor who offered something she hadn't felt in years: attention without expectation. Their connection didn't erupt overnight, but formed slowly, like water seeping through cracks. In her conversations with Mike, she found a reflection of the woman she used to be, before the spotlight had reshaped her into someone else's idea of perfect. Through their growing closeness, Priscilla was reminded that there was a world outside Graceland, one where she could be more than just a companion to someone else's legend. But make no mistake, this turning point wasn't born out of rebellion or revenge. It was something deeper, quieter, and far more human. Priscilla's realization wasn't about betraying Elvis. It was about saving herself. She began to understand that staying meant losing more than her time. It meant giving up her chance at a life of meaning, connection, and truth. And once that awareness took root, there was no way to unsee it. The choice ahead of her was no longer between Elvis and someone else. It was between fading away or finally stepping into her own light. The moment had been building for years, layer by layer, silence by silence, until the weight of what Priscilla carried became too heavy to bear. She had rehearsed the words in her mind countless times, but when the moment finally arrived, they trembled on her lips. It wasn't a fight, not an explosion of blame or rage. It was quiet, still, and heartbreakingly calm. Elvis stood just feet away, unaware that everything was about to change. Priscilla looked at him, not as the icon adored by millions, but as the man she had waited on, sacrificed for, and loved deeply. And then, with a pause that seemed to stretch through time, she spoke. "This is probably the most difficult thing I'm ever going to have to say," she said softly, her voice catching. The air between them shifted. Elvis's face, usually so composed, fell into disbelief. At first, he laughed nervously, brushing it off like one of the many dramas fame had thrown at them before. But when she didn't flinch, when her eyes held firm, his expression changed. It was as if he'd suddenly seen her clearly for the first time in years. Not as a fixture in his world, but as someone who was ready to walk away from it. He tried to reason with her, to remind her of everything he had given her, everything the world envied. "You have everything any woman could want," he insisted. But Priscilla didn't want everything. She wanted something far more rare: peace, purpose, herself. She turned toward the door, her heart pounding, knowing that one step forward meant leaving behind a chapter she'd spent most of her life in. "Scylla," he called after her. She froze. "Maybe another time, another place," he said slowly. She looked back, eyes heavy but resolute. "Maybe so," she replied. "This just isn't the time." Then without another word, she walked away. Out of the room, out of the life she once thought was everything. This story isn't just about a famous couple or the crumbling of a high-profile marriage. It's about something much more universal. It shows us how fame, for all its glimmer and applause, can quietly strip away the very things that make us feel connected and whole. In the grand halls of Graceland and under the blinding lights of the stage, the quiet needs of the heart are often drowned out. Love without presence, promises without follow-through, slowly erode even the deepest bonds. Priscilla's story is a reminder that attention and affection can't be replaced by luxury or status, not even when you're married to the most famous man in the world. For years, Priscilla stood by Elvis's side, while millions adored him from afar. She was there in the silence after the curtain fell, the long nights when he was unreachable, the mornings when he never woke up beside her. To outsiders, she had it all, a fairy tale life written in gold and framed in headlines. But inside that gilded life, she was quietly starving for something simple, the feeling of being truly seen, truly heard, and genuinely loved, not as an accessory, but as a partner. She didn't ask for the moon. She asked for something far more valuable: time, shared mornings, conversations that mattered, a hand to hold when the crowds were gone. But in the world they lived in, those things were harder to come by than fame or fortune. And in the end, that's what makes her story so striking. Not the grandeur of what she had, but the deep, aching absence of what she didn't. Have you ever chased something that seemed flawless on the surface, only to discover it was hollow where it counted most? It's easy to get swept up in the glitter of what looks right, the job, the relationship, the lifestyle. But sometimes it's not until we're deep inside it that we realize the most essential pieces, peace, connection, meaning, are nowhere to be found. Stories like this remind us that perfection can be a mirage, and even the most beautiful lives can hide the deepest loneliness. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stories of fame, love, and the very human truths that often get lost in the spotlight. There's always more to the story than meets the eye.